hold these truths to be self-evident.
That all men are created equal.
As a member of Congress, I get to have a lot of really interesting people in the office. Experts on what they're talking about.
This is the podcast
for insights into the issues.
China, bioterrorism, Medicare for all. In-depth discussions.
Breaking it down into simple terms. We hold these truths.
We hold these truths.
With Dan Crenshaw.
The Eagle has landed.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Today is a very special episode. Today we have Courtney Litvak from Katy, Texas. That's a suburb of Houston. And we're here today because she came into my office not too long ago and talked to me about an issue that is a scourge in Houston and across America. And it's an issue that a lot of people don't understand very well. It's human trafficking and sex trafficking in particular. And she talked to me about this because she is a survivor of this awful epidemic. But she's not only a survivor, she's doing something about it. She is an ambassador of Childproof America and really an educator on this issue. So Courtney, welcome and thank you so much for being here and sharing your story.
Thank you for having me, Congressman Crenshaw. It is an honor to be here because this issue is so important, and the more people who can hear my story and my message and my mission, the more people we can impact positively against this crime.
And that's what this is about. It's about empowering people with some knowledge here and some education. Yes. And you know, the best way to frame this, I think, because I want you to tell your story here. And I think people, when they think of sex trafficking, they think of the movie Taken.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that doesn't happen. I'm sure it can, but that's usually not how it happens. And it's certainly not how it happens in the, you know, upper middle class suburbs of Houston. So take us through, to the extent that you're comfortable, just the steps of how this happened to you.
So, you know, the movie Taken is very well known and it has been viewed by many people. And this is where they develop the idea that they understand what human trafficking looks like, what it sounds like, and how it happens every time. Now, it's very important not to, you know, discredit the people who do experience sex trafficking in that way. It absolutely does happen to people, but it's important to understand the 360, you know, reality of this, and that it can show itself in many forms, and there's a lot more discreet and low-key ways that this can come into our society in ways that people don't know what they're looking for, and what you don't know, you don't know. And that is what puts people at a disadvantage. And that's where my family and myself were put at a disadvantage when this came into our own home and into our own community that we believed was immune to a crime like this, let alone not even knowing that this was something that happened outside of, you know, third world countries, and that this was impacting the United States in such a way that it is one of the largest growing criminal enterprises to date.
Right. And it's like a mental manipulation,
yes.
Right? And it's not as simple as, hey, somebody gets kidnapped and forced into this. It's much more complex than that, and
yes.
more, in a sense, more evil.
It is organized crime.
It's related to organized crime and,
yes.
and other crimes as well. I mean, it's not so the people running these kinds of operations, they're not just involved in one thing. They're involved in a whole variety of things. I mean, is that correct?
That is correct. And what's important is to just put things in perspective is that when you have a drug or you have, you know, an illegal gun, you can sell those things one time, mm-hmm. and you have to re-up on supply. You have a human being and you can sell that human being time and time again and have that person under your control to the extent that they're not as much as a liability as these other criminal enterprises are, and that there's so much more profit to be made. And at the end of the day, what criminals and predators are looking for is less risk and more profit.
So how do they manipulate somebody into that? I mean, do they look for, what signs do they look for in somebody, and then how do they keep them in this sort of this hellish experience?
So what's really important is that the information that we share is to not put people into fear, but again, that knowledge is power. So these things are so important that we're talking about today. The things that people need to understand that can make them a target is something that we all have in common, something that is a constant in society and us growing up, whether you're a young person, a young adult, a minor, this impacts every demographic. This does not have one face. This crime does not discriminate. So what does make somebody a target for this crime? And what's important to understand is we all do not get through life unscathed. So therefore we are all left vulnerable to an extent. You know, for people who want to take advantage of people who are suffering, people who have gone through a hardship in life and are looking to fill that void with something another person could convince them is the solution.
Right.
And so that is what these people will do, is they convince you that they have the solution to all of your problems. And that should be the first red flag, because nobody can fix all of your problems. So when we are going through life, and I'm going to reference the younger generations who are impacted by this, because they are the most vulnerable.
Right.
We don't know what we don't know. And when you're so young, you're so impressionable, you're so trusting, you can be so naive, and you can't admit any of these things at the time.
Right.
You're constantly defending yourself, that you have your best interest. You know what's best for yourself. Whether you have the loving support of a family or you don't, or you're in the foster care system, you come from a great community, a great background, it doesn't matter. When somebody has gone through a trauma in life, whether it's complex, whether it's minor or moderate, and people will come into these schools, people will come into your Sunday school service. These are the places that are the most unseeming. These are the places where you think you can trust the people who are around you. And that is when this gap happens, when you believe that you're safe, when in reality, these are the places predators are looking for.
I mean, they can tell, something's wrong. They want to be your friend, and, come hang out with us, come hang out with this group.
Yes.
Right. And it starts that way. Right.
And the want and need for acceptance is so strong, especially at a young age.
People, yeah.
Exactly. And so you're willing to do many things to feel this acceptance that you believe you need so badly. Right. And so unfortunately, that is when people start to, lose their moral compass, depending on what they, were raised on and their beliefs. I strayed so far from my beliefs that I was unrecognizable to people who had known me. But what people need to understand is this is a process. This happens over a period of time. It is methodical. It can happen over a matter of weeks, months, or years, but people are putting an investment of time in to see a profit back in return and see a return on their investment. And so when people are in the schools and people are approached by somebody who's a seemingly friendly and familiar face, by word of mouth, they've heard of this person, whether or not they have a close relationship or not, the first stage in the grooming process is to befriend. And that is the most unharmful seeming situation where it's so simple as what you would just believe happens on a day-to-day basis. When somebody says hi to you, even if this person's never taken interest into you before, you are left susceptible to that, not believing there's any harm caused by that conversation. And it starts with a conversation. Yeah.
And so if you're a parent or a friend and you're not sure what's going on with your daughter or your friend, what signs would somebody look for?
So it's really hard for people who are, especially in the younger generation, for parents to sit back and say, how does this differentiate from, them going through the phase, just being rebellious teenage years or hormonal, or just going through that time in their life where they want more independence? How do we, know these are red flags that are showing us there could be something more severe going on? Yeah. And so when that happens, something that you can do is, Childproof America, whom I'm the ambassador for, we really speak very in depth about these grooming stages. And the grooming stage is that person who will build that trust with you, will begin this process that I've told you will take place over a period of time. And the beginning of that is to befriend. And the other steps that are included in this process is to intoxicate. So you may begin to experiment with drugs. All of this is to get you out of your best frame of mind so that you're more susceptible to the things that they're wanting to tell you and they're wanting you to believe. So you will believe in their cause, their mission, and you will become on board with that. They will alienate you from your friends, your peer group that would hold you accountable. Yeah. They will have you isolated from your family and start to withdraw to the point that you're trusting these people who have come into your life all of a sudden, seemingly trustworthy with no credibility, and you will begin to distrust the people who have been there for you your entire life. And some of these things may sound extreme, but it does really sink in with youth and people who are wanting some kind of freedom, and they believe that this is a way to gain independence, to gain a right to find out who they are and self-identify.
And it's hard for people to believe because it's such the mental manipulation that the traffickers use is so sociopathic, right? Because that takes a lot of effort to put that much effort into time into the befriending that you're talking about, and giving them drugs, into targeting their emotions and their vulnerabilities. I mean, that takes time. That's
Yes.
It takes a lot of effort, and just for money. In the end, it's just for money. There's a million ways to make money in America, but this is what. And maybe I saw you shake your head, so maybe it's more than money.
Yes.
So is it like did they get off on this power? I mean, what is wrong with these people?
You hit it right on the spot. Yes, money is a huge factor, and that will be the most obvious, motivation for these people. I mean, if it doesn't make money, it doesn't make sense, as they say.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing truly is that there is more behind the scenes going on. Like you said, this is psychotic behavior.
Yeah.
These are people who are not stable individuals. They themselves have experienced trauma in their life.
Yeah, maybe it's like they want to inflict it on somebody else almost.
And they may not even realize they are doing so, but you are entirely correct. This is about power as well. And they want to seek power in their lives that they may not have ever felt they had before. So they may have an issue with women. They may have an issue with authority. And they are going to fight those things by, inflicting these atrocities onto other people while not dealing with anything they faced in their past.
Yeah. God, it's just it's hard to hear, and the things you told me about your story, it really is, and it's so surprising to people. And I can't emphasize this point enough because I know we got to talk about the solutions and what you're really working on now. But it's so important to emphasize that this wasn't trafficking across the border. This wasn't coming from European countries, right? This isn't necessarily what you see in the movies. That stuff happens too, a lot.
Yes.
But it happens, where you least expect it, in a normal suburb, and that's just so utterly surprising. I mean, I grew up in Katy too, full disclosure. So I mean, we went to, we went to school not far from each other, and it's just mind blowing.
Yes.
So, but what do we do about it? And that's really the question. That's why you're in DC, right? Because you're not just looking at your past. You're actually looking forward. Actually, tell me what you told me before we started recording about how you got to the office today.
Yes. So I just want to say I'm so grateful again to be here, because this is what needs to happen, is to have an open conversation, just to dialogue back and forth, because the subject of the matter that we're discussing can be so heavy and people just want to turn a blind eye, and we've been doing that for far too long. So this is what needs to happen, and it may not make sense to everybody at first what we're saying, but to really let things sink in and to understand the full concept of sex trafficking, human trafficking, brainwashing, to really read in between the lines and to think not so much with what you're told in society, but to go off of your gut. That's things that we don't really promote so much anymore. Mm-hmm. But what's important, though, is also to understand, how I got here today, and quite literally how I got here today. What you just referenced, Congressman, was actually a really cool story, and I would like to share that because I believe it happened for a reason, and I feel led to share it. So on our way to the airport, before we came to DC today, we were in my home city of Houston, which is a huge place where this crime takes place. Mm-hmm. And it's been happening for a long time. And when my story took place and was beginning around several years ago, I was living a much different life in the city of Houston than I once was being raised in Katy, the suburb of Houston. So on our way to the airport today, we were passing some familiar places, some old places where the old me used to live. And it just brought back the memories of not just who I was physically at that time, the decisions I was making, but just the mentality that I was in, the fear I was living in constantly, the things I was accepting as love and as what I was worth, and that what I was doing was who I truly was. But what was so interesting is I didn't feel the need to stare at these places and to reminisce. No, instead, I found myself looking forward to this trip, to coming to DC, because I know we're doing something about this. Like, I get to see all those things I've been through are actually coming to bear fruit to do something about it, and not to just talk about it, but to take action about it. To be sitting here with you today, that's something you couldn't have told the old Courtney that she would be doing not too long ago. But as I'm driving to the airport, I'm actually looking in my rearview mirror at these places. And that just had a thought come to mind that, you know, so many people say when they're referencing an analogy with rear view mirrors and our past and our future, is that you can't get to where you're going if you're so focused on the past and looking in your rear view mirror. And something I thought to myself that's a little different than what I've heard is, you know what? We're constantly checking all of our mirrors when we're on our way to our final destination.
Yeah.
And that it's important to not miss one and to not look back, and not just to look forward, but to check all of your mirrors, check all your perspectives.
Yeah.
That's what you're supposed to do to get to your destination safe and
That's right.
sound and where you're meant to be. And so as I'm looking back, I know I wouldn't be where I was going without where I've been.
Yeah. It's a beautiful analogy, and it's a beautiful way to frame that. And it's powerful too. And it's you know, to think about that ride. Yes. And in your past, and you can't escape it, but you can keep moving forward. And so tell us about that. Childproof America. So you're an ambassador for Childproof America. What exactly is that?
So coming from the places I've been and the experiences I've lived through, I knew I lived through those things for a reason, because so many people do not. And it's really important to acknowledge those things as well. Those are the harsh realities that we face. So many people don't live through what I have lived through. So knowing that I made it out when so many people are still presently in that life, and so many people were consumed by that life that they lost their lives to that lifestyle, is that I was put in a position for a reason. I was put in touch with the right people for a reason. My family was positioned for a reason and for a purpose. Everything I do is with great purpose. I don't take one day for granted anymore. Just to wake up and be alive is a gift. So what am I going to do with that gift? And Childproof America gave me an opportunity to do something on a platform such as this, for a time such as this, something so major, and to have the title as ambassador, that comes with a lot of responsibility. And with responsibility comes self-accountability. And that's something that I lacked so much in my previous life. Yeah. And so with the role as ambassador, I have a title and a position and a platform to use my voice as a survivor and overcomer, no longer a victim, to share with people, this is the face of someone who's been through this, and I'm representing this cause. But at the same time, this is the face of someone who survived it. And not only survived, I'm not just breathing to survive anymore, but I'm living my life doing something greater than myself. Yeah. And that is all the things that I represent as Childproof America ambassador. And so what I do, my role consists of many different things, and I get to do one-on-one peer-to-peer interventions. I get to go into people's homes. They get to come into my space, and we get to connect and have a conversation like you and I are doing now. And that is what it is about, giving people a voice, and sometimes not speaking, but listening. And that's what I do as Childproof America ambassador, and so much more.
So you'll actually go and speak to a family that might be going through this. So it's a lot. So it's a lot more than, you also go to schools too, and right? And you'll educate that way to broader groups. But I didn't realize you'll actually go right to the heart of the problem. You'll actually speak to somebody who might be in the facing this down. That's incredible, and I'm assuming that's pretty powerful for them.
It's powerful on both ends because it keeps me reminded and humbled to the cause I'm fighting for, that it's happening every night I go to sleep, every day I wake up, someone is being impacted by this.
Yeah.
And the more time that I waste not facing it head on, then the more ground we lose in trying to get ahead of this rather than chasing this. So it's so important to go to where the families are, to the people.
Mm-hmm.
It's what the people are the most important thing
Right.
of this, not the money, not the drugs, not all the other things that are involved in this. Even the predators themselves aren't nearly as important as the people who are targeted and impacted by this, and their lives are changed. And that is who we work for.
Well, we've got some good law enforcement people to take care of the predators. But so how does, but the more importantly, like you said, it's the victims. And so if somebody's listening to this right now and their family feels like they have a problem, how do they normally get in touch with Childproof America?
So what's crazy is actually that peer-to-peer interventions are not even one of Childproof America's written initiatives. We are known so much across the greater Katy and Houston area for what we do, because there's so many different people who have great organizations to combat human trafficking. Mm-hmm. But what we do to directly work with the families, and what we're working on a family guides program, we're so oriented around serving the people who are being impacted right now. And so people, by word of mouth have heard of us and have heard that this is something we do and that we are trustworthy. This is what we care about. This is what we want to invest even our personal time into. There's no limit to when we will go and reach out to these families, but how they reach out to us is from other people who have, worked with us or heard of us, and they can, vet us to these families. And the families, when you're in this situation and you even have a hint that your child or loved one or someone is being impacted by human or sex trafficking, you're desperate and you will start reaching out to as many people as you can think of. And so we are on people's radars, and that is a God-given thing, because people find a way to us, and so we don't even know how sometimes, but they do, and that's how we make initial contact with these families.
Okay. Well, just to make it easy on them, I'm assuming can they go to a website?
Yes, childproofamerica.org is our website, and there's a lot of great information on there, and we have the National Human Trafficking Hotline posted on there. There's different phone numbers they can reach out to, and we are constantly giving out our business cards so that people can directly reach out to us, because confidentiality and privacy is such a important thing when you're dealing with this issue. And so however people feel comfortable, they will find a way to reach out to us, or we will find a way to reach out to them.
That's incredible, because just trying to put yourself in the position of a parent, and with Kelly, your mom here, who knows that position very well, and you feel helpless. You can call the cops, but what are they going to do? There's no crime. There hasn't been a law broken necessarily, not yet, right? In the beginning stages, but you can sense something is off, and there's nothing you can do about that. And so what you're saying you do is you actually go and you maybe speak to maybe a girl and you can relate to her. You can actually say, listen, I've been through this, and we can help you through it.
And what's important to know is I don't only just speak to girls, to women, but I have done interventions with men and boys as well. And
I shouldn't leave them out. That's true.
Yes, but it's so great that you brought that up so I could speak on that and emphasize that there's so many stereotypes, and that's so important in this conversation we're having now, is for people to know one of my roles here is to break those stereotypes. My story is proof that these stereotypes are not as true as everyone believes they are. And there's so much stigma surrounding this in the sex industry and trafficking, domestic, international, and, people's involvement in it in high places and different things such as that. And so for people to understand that this impacts all demographics, all races, all genders, it doesn't matter. This crime does not have a face. And so it's a human rights issue. So this affects all of us.
Oh, absolutely. So tell us about what other programs are out there. So at the Department of Homeland Security, you said you're familiar with the Blue campaign.
Correct.
And so tell us, what do people need to know about that? How can that help?
So we have, as much as this crime is growing and so much more awareness is being raised against this crime for people to get educated, we have so many great policymakers, law enforcement, people who are ready to step up to the plate and to the task and to do something different, and they want to listen and they want to hear what can we be doing better. And so people who are willing to work with people who have firsthand experienced this, like myself and such, champions for this cause, such as Congressman Michael McCall, who was, had a huge part in writing and drafting the Blue Campaign.
Right.
And so the Blue Campaign is about education. And it's not just about education, because what's so important is once people are made aware of this issue, and it's about educating law enforcement, it's about educating students, it's about educating people across the country, is what the Blue Campaign stands for. But then now that we know this and have this information, what are we supposed to do with it? What do we do to prevent this from infiltrating our loved ones' lives or our communities? What can we do to combat this? So the Blue Campaign is also about action. And that's so important, is following education, is that we're being proactive. And so I really have respect for the people in, Homeland Security, the efforts they're making. And the Blue Campaign was a very good effort in the right direction.
Yeah. What they do effectively is they bring together a lot of the different levels of government, the local law enforcement with the state to the federal resources that are all brought to bear against this problem. And we had some folks from Blue Campaign in Houston not too long ago when we did a human trafficking symposium, and we'd love to have you speak at the next one because we got to keep highlighting this issue. And in Houston, at least, there's great coordination, and because it is such a problem, and at least we are addressing it. That's for sure. But there's still so much more to be done. And that fact has also made it to the White House. So I want you to tell us about your relationship with the White House and how Ivanka Trump in particular has taken this on.
So, just as much as I'm in awe sitting here with you today of just the journey that I've been on to get to where I am today, I respect the journey, and I understand it more than I ever did when I was in it, because I'm from the outside looking in. But just the moment when you realize you're in your nation's capital, surrounded by people who have the platform to actually combat this crime in the way that it needs to be, it needs to be talked about, it needs to be dealt with. It's so surreal to be here, and a person who is a huge champion for this cause, who has aligned with myself and Childproof America, that was so unexpected. And the best way, and Congressman McCall made this possible, was getting to meet with the first daughter, Ivanka Trump. And this meeting took place, actually we were in contact before the meeting this past November officially took place. We were on a phone call together in the month of May, and we had a very a long duration call together, just talking about different initiatives and sharing more of my story with her and highlighting the important parts, not listing details that were not teachable, so that we could discuss, okay, what's the big picture? And her big question was, what are the gaps? So I know, what can I do to fill those gaps? Yeah. What do you see that needs to be different, that would have made your outcome so much different, that would have helped your story and your family when you were going through this? What are you experiencing now with the families and the victims you interact with? And so having it be so relevant to the fact of wanting to listen, that's just such a huge point, is that you don't know what you don't know. And we have wonderful people here in Congress who are so well versed in other things, but there's certain issues, unless you've lived through it yourself, you can't fully comprehend the reality of this. Right. And so Ivanka has been so great at having a dialogue. And when we were able to finally meet at the White House in the month of November face to face, we made the most of the time that we had during that meeting. And she is a great listener, and I appreciated everything she brought to the table, and that was not an end-all conversation, that there's going to be many more conversations. And, and I looked at her and said, I want to work with you and come alongside you, because you're a doer. Yeah. And I can't sit down and have conversations anymore without action following these conversations. And I know you're going to get the job done, because things need to be different. we can do better. We can always do better. So what are we going to do to put those things into place? Once you've heard my truth, what are we going to do to make that a reality for the other people who aren't given the platform that I'm given to be sitting here with you today? But that meeting was so surreal. I literally ran into Ivanka's arms when we were in her office, actually, and I was seeing her for the first time after only hearing her voice on the phone, and I just started crying. And that's something unusual for me. I'm not, so in touch with my emotions as I once was. There's that numbness. And so having not even felt that until the moment that I was walking up to officially meet her, it just set in that the journey I've been on has brought me to this point, and that's a God thing. And I told her that as well, that the meeting we had was a divine meeting and that there was going to be great outcome to come from the meeting. And that was just the first one. And we have so much talk of the future that we're looking towards and continuing partnership and putting our great minds together and working with other experts in this field. And it's about bringing in as many experts in their different fields that we can, because everyone has something great to bring to the table and something Ivanka really understands, and what Childproof America firmly believes in is that if somebody is an expert in this field and we're an expert in this, we need to partner together and all be on the same page and not be competitive. This is the last thing to be competitive about. We need to unite together as one so we can create the greatest impact possible in combating this.
Oh, absolutely. And I know you don't want to jinx it, but at the time of this recording, you're a couple days away from hopefully getting on Ivanka's advisory council. Is that correct? We're not sure yet. So we're knocking on wood.
We're cautiously we're cautiously optimistic. That is the mindset and the spirit I move forward in. But just to even be considered, to have somebody put that kind of trust in me when I was at a point I no longer trusted myself. I wasn't worthy of other people's trust. And for someone such as Ivanka Trump and the presidential personnel to say, not only do we trust you, but we want to listen and your voice matters, just even for that to happen for anyone who's been through what I've been through means so much to me, to see that they're working with survivors. This is not about politics. This is not about something. It's not about business. This is about listening from people who have firsthand experienced this as a reality and lived through this. So whether or not that I get this position, I'm so grateful to have even been considered to serve in a capacity such as that. And I'm so honored that we have an administration that is putting this as a priority, and they are working with people who are survivors themselves. And that's what it's all about.
Well, you are making an impact, and I think you've got a much bigger impact in your future. I think that's obvious, and I think we should all be pretty grateful for that. It's inspiring. So, Courtney, thank you for that. That's a good place to end, and I'm sure by the time we're done, that we actually post this, you'll probably be on the presidential advisory.
But we're not jinxing it, right, Congressman Crenshaw?
We'll see.